At the center of one of the most dangerous conflicts on Earth right now is a man who technically commands the armed forces of 90 million people, holds the nuclear file, and controls a chokehold on 20% of the world's oil supply. His first name is being chanted in the streets of Tehran, but not in praise. It's prefixed with the words, "Death to." His name is Mojtaba Khamenei, the newly appointed supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Herein lies the problem. Nobody has seen him. Not his generals, not his cabinet, not the Iranian public. Not a single camera on Earth has captured him since the war began. There is no video, no audio, and not even a recent photograph that hasn't been AI enhanced by the regime's propaganda arm. What exists is a written statement full of typos that sources say was dictated by the Revolutionary Guard and published under his name. Meanwhile, the United States Secretary of Defense stands at a Pentagon podium, stating on the record that Iran's new supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. This raises a brutally simple question that every intelligence agency, oil trader, government in the Middle East, and every Iranian with a rooftop is asking. Is Mojtaba Khamenei actually leading Iran, or is something far more dangerous filling the vacuum where a leader should be? To understand the current situation, we need to go back to February 28, 2026. That day marked a significant turning point. In the early hours of that morning, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated campaign of airstrikes targeting Iranian leadership compounds, nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile production lines, naval assets, and command centers. Analysts described the first 36 hours of this operation as the most concentrated assault on a nation's military architecture since the Gulf War. The United States alone expended an estimated 1,250 offensive and defensive munitions, with defense officials later informing Congress that the cost of those 2 days of munitions came to approximately $5.6 billion. One of those strikes hit the Ba'athari compound, which houses the Supreme Leader's office and residence in Tehran. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had led the Islamic Republic for 37 years, was killed in that strike, along with dozens of top military commanders, intelligence officials, and members of the Khamenei family. Iranian state media later confirmed that Mojtaba Khamenei's mother, wife, and sister all died in the same attack. The inner circle of the supreme leader was effectively decapitated in a single night. However, Mojtaba Khamenei himself was reportedly not present at the compound during the strike. According to multiple reports from CNN, the New York Times, and Iranian officials, he survived the initial attack, but how intact he survived is fiercely disputed. Here's what the reporting tells us about Mojtaba Khamenei's injuries. CNN, citing a source with knowledge of the situation, reported that he suffered a fractured foot, bruising around his left eye, and minor lacerations to his face. The New York Times reported injuries to his legs, citing 3 Iranian officials, and indicated that he was alert and sheltering in a highly secure, heavily fortified location with severely limited communications. Iran's ambassador to Cyprus told The Guardian that he had heard Khamenei's arms and legs were injured. Then there is the most revealing detail of all. Iran's own state-affiliated news agencies, including the IRGC-linked Fars News, referred to the new supreme leader using the term jambaz. This is not a casual term. In Persian, jambaz is specifically used for Iran's disabled war veterans, those who have suffered severe physical injuries, including the loss of limbs. State television briefly applied the same term to Khamenei before retracting it. The regime's own language suggests something it does not want to say outright. On Friday, March 13th, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin stepped to the podium at the Pentagon and stated clearly, "We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured." He offered no specific evidence and did not elaborate on the nature of the wounds, but he underscored the central mystery that has been building for 2 weeks. Iran has plenty of cameras and voice recorders. Why a written statement? President Trump informed G7 leaders in a virtual call that Khamenei is not in good shape, adding, "Nobody knows who the leader is, so there is no one that can announce surrender." An Iranian official pushed back, asserting that Khamenei was safe and sound. However, denying something and demonstrating it are 2 very different things. After 14 days of war, the Iranian people have still not heard their new supreme leader's voice. They have not seen him move, breathe, or appear in public. To grasp why this matters so much, you need to understand who Mojtaba Khamenei actually is and who he isn't. He is 56 years old and the second son of the man who ran Iran for nearly 4 decades. He fought in the final years of the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s through the IRGC's Habib Battalion, where he built foundational connections to the Revolutionary Guard. He studied Islamic jurisprudence in Qom under senior clerics, and for the better part of 3 decades, he did something unusual for a man of his power. He disappeared into the shadows. Mojtaba Khamenei has never held a formal government post, never given a public speech, never delivered a Friday sermon, and never participated in a single recorded policy debate. He is so rarely photographed that the IRGC's own media channels have been forced to circulate AI-generated images of him alongside his father, depicting scenes that never actually occurred in order to compensate for the lack of a visual archive of the man. Iranian social media users quickly coined a nickname for him, the AI Supreme Leader, Preem. In the days following his appointment, Iranians in several cities took to their rooftops at night and chanted, "Death to Mojtaba," using the same act of nocturnal dissent that was employed against his father during the protests of 2019 and 2022. What Mojtaba Khamenei had working entirely out of public view was power, enormous, opaque, and dangerous power. Analysts, Iranian dissidents, and the U.S. Treasury Department, which sanctioned him in 2019, widely believe he was the man behind the manipulation of presidential elections in 2005 and 2009. He coordinated directly with IRGC commanders and intelligence units from within his father's office and reportedly helped direct the violent crackdowns on the Green Movement protesters in 2009 and subsequent uprisings. A reformist candidate who ran in those elections wrote letters to Ali Khamenei directly accusing his son of interference. When the elder Khamenei was asked about his son, he reportedly responded, "He is his own man, not just my son." One more detail matters here. In 2024, when Iran's Assembly of Experts quietly began discussing succession, Ali Khamenei himself is reported by the New York Times to have said his son should be excluded from consideration. He reportedly opposed the creation of a dynasty, recognizing that appointing his own son would evoke the monarchism of the Shah, the very thing the 1979 revolution overthrew. That opposition was overridden. When Ali Khamenei died on February 28th, the IRGC moved quickly. According to Iran International, Revolutionary Guard commanders began pressuring members of the Assembly of Experts within hours, using what the outlet described as repeated contacts and psychological and political pressure to push for Mojtaba. The Assembly convened its own session in Qom to push for this purpose. By March 9th, just 10 days after the war began, the announcement was made. The third supreme leader of the Islamic Republic was the son of the second, a dynasty established by emergency decree. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, made clear what this means in terms of targeting. Before the appointment was even finalized, he publicly stated that any leader appointed to continue the plan to destroy Israel would be an unequivocal target for elimination. That is not just a rhetorical warning, it is operational guidance. The man who agreed to become supreme leader under those conditions is acutely aware that he is being hunted, sheltering underground with limited communications while the most powerful military alliance in the world continues to conduct strikes inside his country every single hour. This brings us to the statement. On the evening of Thursday, March 12th, 4 days after his appointment and nearly 2 full weeks after the war began, Iranian state television broadcast what it called Mojtaba Khamenei's first message to the Iranian people. A news anchor sat on camera, placed a photograph of the new supreme leader on the screen, and read the words aloud. There was no video of Khamenei, no audio of his voice, just the photograph and someone else's voice reading his words. The statement itself was defiant in content. It vowed that the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed, threatened that Iran would open other fronts in which the enemy has little experience, and called for continued attacks on U.S. military bases hosted by neighboring Gulf states. It demanded vengeance, not just for the killing of his father, but for every Iranian civilian killed in the bombings. Every member of the nation who is martyred by the enemy is an independent subject for the revenge case. The statement was laden with coded religious symbolism, released alongside an image of 3 handwriting samples from Iran's 3 supreme leaders, crafted to project lineage and legitimacy. However, there were problems with the statement. Multiple typographical errors appeared in a document that should have been proofread at every level of the state apparatus before release. A knowledgeable source in Tehran informed the media that the statement had actually been drafted by the IRGC and later rewritten in Khamenei's clerical style. IRGC-affiliated Telegram channels amplified the message almost before state media did, a telling sequence if you are tracking who actually controls the information flow. Additionally, the message was written in Arabic Hijri calendar dating rather than Iran's official national calendar, an unusual choice that analysts noted highlighted Khamenei's distance from everyday Iranian civic life. Many senior officials, according to multiple reports, had not seen him in person since the war began. Suzanne Maloney of the Brookings Institution, a leading American analyst of the Islamic Republic, put it plainly: the longer he remains absent from public view, the more concerns there will be about the stability of this new leadership and the regime as a whole. What is actually happening inside the Iranian power structure right now is not a mystery, at least not structurally. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, with nearly 200,000 personnel, operates its own intelligence apparatus, its own economic empire, its own foreign policy through the Quds Force proxy network, and its own media ecosystem. It was functioning before Mojtaba Khamenei was named supreme leader, and it will continue to function whether or not he is capable of walking across a room. The IRGC needs a supreme leader the way a military commander needs a flag, not to direct the battle, but to legitimize it. Mojtaba's appointment gives the Guard the political and religious cover it needs to continue prosecuting what the regime is calling the Ramadan War. As CNN's analysts noted, some of what matters most in Tehran right now is not the visibility of the supreme leader, but the cohesion of the institutions beneath him. Those institutions are still functioning, albeit at an enormous cost to the rest of the world. Since February 28th, the U.S. and Israel have struck more than 15,000 targets in Iran, according to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's briefing on Friday. Iran's ballistic missile production capacity has been, according to the Pentagon, functionally destroyed, and its drone launch capability has been reduced by 95%. 17 Iranian naval vessels were destroyed in the first week alone, and Iran's nuclear sites have been repeatedly struck. The country is running a parallel economy of destruction and defiance, taking catastrophic military losses while simultaneously unleashing havoc on the global energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz, the 21 nautical mile choke point between Iran and Oman, through which 1/5 of the world's oil and significant volumes of liquefied natural gas flow every day, has been effectively closed. Before February 28th, roughly 138 vessels transited the strait on an average day. As of this week, that number has dropped to approximately 2. It is not a physical wall that has closed it. It is the actuarial tables. War risk insurance premiums have exploded. Without coverage, no commercial ship owner will send a vessel through. Iran has also begun laying naval mines, a development that intelligence officials warn could extend the effective blockade for weeks beyond any ceasefire, since mines persist even when the shooting stops. The economic consequences are not hypothetical. They are impacting you now and are expected to worsen. Brent crude oil, the international benchmark, surged above $119 per barrel during intraday trading on March 9th before easing back and has been oscillating around the $100 mark ever since. Gasoline prices across the United States have already climbed above $4 per gallon nationally, with California exceeding $5. The International Energy Agency's 31 member states voted unanimously to release 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, roughly 4 days of global consumption. Saudi Arabia has cut production after 2 offshore fields were damaged. Some analysts are warning that a prolonged closure, measured in weeks rather than days, could push prices to $200 per barrel. Every day the strait remains closed, an estimated 15 million barrels of supply are absent from the global market. Every day this war continues costs the United States roughly $1 billion in military expenditures alone, on top of a federal budget already under severe structural pressure. And in the midst of all this, leading Iran's response from somewhere underground is a man no one has seen in 2 weeks, a man whose own country's state media accidentally referred to as a war amputee, a man whose first statement was read by someone else, contained typographical errors, and drew a line in the sand on the very waterway that is strangling the global economy. So, what happens next? There are three potential directions this could take. The most likely near-term path is what analysts are calling a managed absence. The IRGC continues running wartime operations, while Khamenei's office issues written statements. The regime projects the image of continuity without demonstrating its reality. This buys time, but it corrodes legitimacy with every passing day that Iranians do not hear his voice. The Euronews assessment is accurate here. No visibility does not automatically undermine legitimacy in the short term, especially if institutions appear coordinated. However, the short term has limits, and those limits are already being tested by a population that was in open revolt before the bombs started falling. In January of this year, thousands of protesters were killed by Iranian security forces during an uprising, and that population has not forgotten. The second possibility is a leadership collapse, not a military defeat, but an internal fracture. If Mojtaba's injuries are more severe than the regime is admitting, or if he is genuinely incapacitated or dies, the question of who fills that vacuum becomes immediate and explosive. The IRGC has already shown it can pressure the assembly of experts, but the Islamic Republic has no established succession protocol beyond that body, and the assembly itself just appointed a man under duress. A second succession crisis during an active war, with the country under daily bombardment, would test the regime's cohesion in ways that no external military campaign has managed to do in 47 years. The third scenario is the one that markets fear the most, and that diplomats are working hardest to prevent from escalating beyond the current geography. In his first statement, Mojtaba Khamenei specifically referenced opening new fronts in which the enemy has little experience and will be extremely vulnerable. That is not empty rhetoric in a theater where Iran's Houthi partners in Yemen are still operational, where Hezbollah retains assets in Lebanon despite being degraded, and where Iranian-affiliated groups in Iraq are already attacking U.S. forces. The day after Khamenei's statement was published, the IRGC launched an attack on Dubai, overriding a statement by Iran's own president that strikes on neighboring countries had been halted. That is the most alarming detail in this entire situation. The man who is supposed to be giving orders may not actually be the one giving them. The IRGC is acting autonomously. When the entity with the weapons stops deferring to the entity with the title, you are no longer in a managed conflict. You are in something considerably harder to stop. What you are witnessing unfold is a historic stress test of a political system that was always fundamentally designed around the authority of a single supreme leader. Ruhollah Khomeini built that system in 1979. Ali Khamenei ran it for 37 years. And now, in the middle of a war that is reshaping the entire Middle East, the man who is supposed to occupy that role has not been seen in public since before the bombs fell. His first message to his nation was delivered by someone else. His title was given to him under pressure from the military apparatus he is supposed to command. And his injuries are a state secret in a country where state secrets dissolve into speculation within hours. He is scared, injured, on the run, and lacks legitimacy. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said at the Pentagon on Friday that whether that is exactly true or partially true, the fact that the U.S. Secretary of Defense can say it without producing a shred of counter-evidence illustrates the vacuum at the center of the Iranian state right now. There is a photo from the Iranian capital this week of a massive billboard in Engelab Square, Revolution Square, showing three supreme leaders in succession: Khomeini, Ali Khamenei, and Mojtaba Khamenei. A dynasty painted onto the wall of a republic that was founded by overthrowing a dynasty. Below that billboard, Iranians walk past without looking up. In other parts of the city, people are chanting on rooftops. In the streets, the Basij is firing live rounds. The man on that billboard has not been seen in 2 weeks. His country is at war. His enemies are hunting him, and his own forces may be acting without him. The question is not whether Iran survives this war militarily. History suggests it will endure in some form. The question is what kind of Iran emerges on the other side, and who is actually at the controls while it gets there. If this story matters to you, and if you own a car, pay a grocery bill, or live on the same planet as the Strait of Hormuz, it does. hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. This is developing faster than any single news cycle can track, and the next 72 hours may answer the question that no one in Tehran is willing to answer publicly. Is Mojtaba Khamenei actually in charge, or is Iran being run by the institution that put him in power?